The email arrived on a Tuesday, not a Tuesday like any other, but a Tuesday that felt preordained. Like the universe had finally decided to deliver the punchline to a joke I hadn't realized I was the subject of. The subject line was innocuous enough, thinking of you, but the sender, a name I didn't recognize, was the first tremor, and then the attachments, a series of photographs. They were artfully composed, I'll give her that. Not blurry, frantic phone snaps, but almost professional. My husband, Mark, in various states of undress, tangled with a woman whose face was always just out of frame, or artfully obscured by a cascade of dark hair. But her body, her pale, slender limbs were unmistakable. And the settings, our bed, our kitchen counter, the small chipped ceramic mug I'd bought Mark for his birthday, sitting on the bedside table in one shot, a silent witness to their clandestine mornings. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the familiar lurch of nausea that usually accompanied betrayal in the movies. Instead, a peculiar calm settled over me. It was the kind of calm you feel when you've been bracing for impact for so long that when it finally comes, it's almost a relief, a confirmation. Mark was a creature of habit. Predictable, which for a long time I'd found predictable, which for a long time I'd found comforting. His morning coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. His evening news, always the same channel. His predictable, slightly dull affection. We've been married for 7 years. 7 years of quiet, unremarkable domesticity. We had a house, a dog, a shared calendar filled with mundane appointments. We were, by all outward appearances, a perfectly ordinary couple. And that, I now realized, was the problem. Ordinary was a cage. I scrolled through the photos again. Her hand, delicate, with a small, distinctive tattoo on her wrist, a tiny, stylized bird. I'd seen that tattoo before, on a barista at the coffee shop Mark frequented on his way to work. A new girl he'd mentioned with a quirky tattoo. He'd even mimicked the bird's flight with his hand, a rare moment of animation from him. I'd smiled, oblivious, or perhaps I'd chosen to be. The email itself was short, almost triumphant. Just thought you should know, it read. Mark and I are very happy. He deserves someone who truly understands him. No name, just the implication. The smug, anonymous declaration of victory. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. Unremarkable. Calm, too calm. A stranger's face, almost. I picked up my phone, not to call Mark, not to call a lawyer, not to call a friend. For sake of Fitch. I opened my banking app, our joint account. The numbers stared back at me, a comfortable, predictable sum. I noted it. Then I opened a separate, less obvious app, a different account, one Mark didn't know about. One I'd been building quietly, meticulously for years. A secret nest egg for a future I hadn't yet defined, but instinctively knew I might need. The photos were still burned into my mind. The chipped mug, the bird, tattoo, the casual intimacy that had been stolen from me, or perhaps that I had never truly possessed. And in that moment, a different kind of calm settled over me. A cold, precise calm. The kind that comes when you realize you're not just a victim in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. And the next chapter was going to be very, very interesting. And the next few days were a masterclass in performance. Mark came home, oblivious, humming some tuneless melody. He asked about my day, kissed my cheek, and settled into his usual routine. I watched him, truly watched him for the first time in years. His slightly receding hairline, the way his jaw clenched when he was stressed. A faux stressed. The faint scent of his aftershave, all familiar, yet suddenly alien. He was a stranger in my house, a character in a play I was now directing. I continued my own routine with a precision that would have impressed a surgeon. I cooked his favorite meals, listened to his mundane work stories, watching his predictable responses with a detached curiosity. Each interaction was a data point. Each smile, each touch, a confirmation of his blindness. He saw the same Anna, the quiet, unassuming wife. He had no idea he was living with a cartographer of his own downfall. Oh, the barista, Chloe, as I now knew her name, became a focal point. Regia. Oh, I started frequenting the coffee shop, not for coffee, but for observation. And she was younger, vibrant, with a laugh that tinkled like wind chimes. She wore bright, impractical dresses and had a habit of tucking a stray curl behind her ear. When she was flustered, Mark, I noticed, would linger at the counter, his eyes following her movements. "'Tis sorry her assasses." Mark, he'd order his usual, but his voice would soften. A subtle shift I'd never heard directed at me. It was a small, pathetic dance, played out daily for anyone who cared to notice. And I cared. Oh, I cared. My secret account, the one I'd been nurturing for years, wasn't born of suspicion, not initially. It was born of a quiet, almost primal need for self-preservation, a small rebellion against the suffocating predictability of my life. I'd started it shortly after we bought the house, when Mark had insisted on managing all the finances, slighting his better head for numbers. I'd agreed, of course, with a placid smile. But then, late at night, I'd started diverting small sums. A few dollars here, a few more there, from my freelance writing income, from birthday money, from the cashback rewards on a credit card he never checked. It was a game, a quiet defiance, and now it was my lifeline. I spent hours online, not just researching divorce laws, but delving into the intricacies of financial forensics. I learned about asset protection, about tracing hidden funds, about the subtle art of making someone else's life very inconvenient. Fascinating, like solving a complex puzzle. Each piece of information I gathered was a tiny, invisible thread, and I was weaving them into a net. A very strong net. Ellie, one evening, Mark mentioned a new investment opportunity. "Something Chloe told me about," he said casually. "Her uncle's got this amazing startup, really cutting edge. She thinks it's a sure thing." He was excited, animated in a way he hadn't been about anything involving us in years. He talked about pulling a significant sum from our joint savings. My heart gave a small, cold lurch. This was it, the moment I smiled, a genuine, if chilling smile. "Oh, really?" I said, feigning interest. "That sounds intriguing. Tell me more." I listened, nodding, asking just enough questions to appear engaged, but not suspicious. He laid out the details, the projected returns, the insider nature of the opportunity. He even showed me a glossy brochure Chloe had given him. It was all so transparent, so utterly predictable. He had no idea that while he was planning his future with his new vibrant muse. I was already dismantling his past, piece by piece, thread by thread, and the net was almost complete. And the investment opportunity was the final piece of the puzzle. Mark, in his predictable eagerness, had given me all the details I needed. The name of the startup, the contact person, even the bank where the funds were to be transferred. It was almost too easy. He was so blinded by Chloe's youthful enthusiasm, so convinced of his own cleverness, that he saw nothing. He saw only the reflection of his desires in her eyes and in the promise of quick money. Only I let him talk, I let him dream. I even offered a few encouraging words, suggesting he do his due diligence, knowing full well he wouldn't. He was a man who preferred the illusion of control to the messy reality of effort. He'd sign whatever was put in front of him, as long as it promised an easy path. My own due diligence, however, was exhaustive. The startup was a shell company, registered in a state known for its lax regulations, with a single, untraceable P.O. boxes its address. The uncle was a phantom. The projected returns were ludicrous, designed to lure the greedy and the gullible. It was a classic, unsophisticated scam. And Mark, my predictable, financially savvy husband, was walking straight into it. The day he initiated the transfer from our joint account, I was at the bank. Not our bank, but a different branch across town. I had already set up a new account solely in my name at a different institution entirely. Over the past few weeks, I had been systematically, almost imperceptibly, siphoning funds from our joint savings into my secret nest egg. Small amounts below the threshold that would trigger an alert, spread out over days and weeks. It was like bleeding a stone, slow and steady, until it was hollow. The bulk of our savings, the sum Mark intended for Chloe's uncle's scam, was still in the joint account. But it wouldn't be for long. As soon as Mark confirmed his transfer, I initiated my own, not to the scam, but to my new, secure, untraceable account. It was a race against the clock, a silent digital duel. I watched the progress bar on my screen, a tiny green line inching forward, mirroring the slow, deliberate dismantling of our shared life. The money moved. First, Mark's into the void of the scam. Then mine, into the quiet safety of my new financial fortress. The joint account, once a symbol of our shared future, was now a barren wasteland. Empty. A perfect reflection of our marriage. I went home. Mark was still at work, probably already fantasizing about his newfound wealth and the admiring gaze of his young protege. I walked through the house, the silence amplifying the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall. Each object, each piece of furniture felt like a prop in a play that was rapidly approaching its final act. I packed a single suitcase, not with clothes, not with sentimental trinkets, with documents, copies of our marriage certificate, his birth certificate, my birth certificate, our tax returns, the deed to the house, the car titles, everything I would need to prove my identity, to untangle myself from the wreckage, to build a new life. I had already scanned digital copies stored securely in the cloud, but there was a primal satisfaction in holding the physical papers, the tangible proof of my existence, separate from his. Early, I left a note on the kitchen counter. Not a dramatic, tear-stained confession, Not an angry diatribe, just a single stark sentence written in my neatest hand. I filed for divorce. You'll be served soon. No explanation, no accusations, no emotional outburst, just the cold, hard fact. The unsent reply finally delivered. I looked at the chipped ceramic mug on the kitchen counter, the one from the photos. I picked it up, felt its familiar weight. Then, with a deliberate, almost gentle motion, I dropped it. It shattered on the tile floor, scattering ceramic shards like fallen stars. A small, satisfying sound in the quiet house. Only then I walked out. The dog Buster whined softly from his bed in the living room. I paused, looked at him. You'll be fine, boy, I whispered, a rare moment of genuine emotion. You'll be fine. He was Mark's dog, after all. Another predictable habit. The key turned in the lock with a soft click. The house, once a home, was now just a structure, empty, like the joint account, like the marriage, and like the future Mark thought he had. I drove, not far, just to a small, anonymous hotel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where no one asks questions, where faces blur into the background. I checked in under a different name, paid in cash. Old habits, learned from years of quiet observation, now serving a new purpose. The room was sterile, impersonal, perfect. It was a blank slate, a temporary refuge before the true rebuilding began. The next few days were a blur of legalities. The divorce papers were served to Mark at his office, a precise surgical strike. I imagined his face, the confusion, then the dawning horror. He would call, of course. He would rage. He would rage. He would demand answers. But I had already changed my number. My old life, severed. Barely my phone, the new one, remained silent. I pictured him pacing the empty house, the shattered mug on the kitchen floor, a silent testament to my departure. He would check the joint account. That would be the real blow. Not the divorce, not the mistress, but the sudden, stark reality of financial ruin. The loss of his perceived control. And then the calls would start. Not from me, but from the startup. The phantom uncle, the realization that his sure thing was a scam and that he had willingly, eagerly emptied his own pockets into a void. The irony was almost poetic. He had been so focused on his petty betrayals, so confident in his superior intellect, that he hadn't seen the larger, more devastating trap he was walking into. I spent my days in quiet contemplation. I watched the news, detached. I saw reports of a small, obscure investment scam being investigated, a fleeting mention that would mean nothing to most, but everything to me. I knew the names, the shell companies, the untraceable P.O. boxes. I knew Mark's money was gone, swallowed by the digital ether. Lee Chloe, the barista with the bird tattoo, would likely be next. Her uncle was a fiction, a convenient lie to lure in unsuspecting Marks like Mark. She was either a willing participant, a small cog in a larger machine, or a naive victim herself. Either way, her world, too, would soon unravel. The thought brought no joy, no triumph. just a quiet, almost clinical satisfaction. Justice, in its own twisted way, was being served. I started planning my next steps, a new city perhaps, a new career, something that truly challenged me, something that wasn't just a quiet backdrop to someone else's life. The secret nest egg, once a symbol of quiet defiance, was now the foundation of my freedom. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start over, unburdened by the weight of a life that had never truly been mine. One evening, as I sat in the impersonal hotel room, the television droning softly in the background, I saw a news report, a local story. Mark, his face pale and drawn, flashed across the screen. He was being questioned by police, not about the divorce, but about the missing funds from the joint account. The reporter mentioned suspicious activity and potential fraud. My name wasn't mentioned. My actions were invisible. He was being investigated for the money he had transferred to the scam, the money he had willingly given away. The bank, seeing the sudden large outflow from a previously stable account, had flagged it. And because the account was joint, and because I had emptied my share just moments before his, the optics were terrible for him. It looked like he had orchestrated the entire thing, perhaps even trying to hide assets from me in a divorce. The perfect self-inflicted wound. I watched his bewildered, panicked expression on the screen. The man who had so confidently, so predictably betrayed me was now caught in a net of his own making. He was trapped, not by my direct action, but by the logical, inevitable consequences of his own greed and carelessness. Oh, the unsent reply. It wasn't a message I sent to him. It was the silence. The absence, the void I left behind, filled only by the echoes of his own choices. And in that silence, I found my freedom. The news reports faded. And Mark's face, his bewildered panic, became just another fleeting image in the endless scroll of the world. I didn't follow the details of his legal troubles. I didn't need to. The outcome was irrelevant to me now. My purpose had been served. The threads I had woven had tightened, and he was caught. Why, not by my hand, but by the very fabric of his own predictable flaws. I left the hotel a few days later. No fanfare, no dramatic exit, just a quiet checkout, a taxi to the airport. I bought a one-way ticket to a city I'd always wanted to visit, a place where no one knew my name, where my past was just a whisper in the wind. The first few weeks were strange, the silence was profound. No more predictable hum of Mark's presence, no more feigned interest in his mundane stories, just the quiet hum of my own thoughts, the rhythm of my own breath. It was liberating, yes, but also VAAS, a vastness that could sometimes feel like emptiness. I found a small apartment, started a new freelance gig. I walked the streets of my new city, a ghost in a crowd of strangers. I was free, truly free for the first time in years. But freedom, I discovered, wasn't always a burst of sunshine. Sometimes it was just a different kind of quiet, a quiet that allowed you to hear the echoes of your own choices, the subtle shifts within yourself. Ashley, the old Anna, the placid, unassuming wife, was gone. She had been meticulously disassembled, piece by piece, just like the joint account. And in her place was someone different. So many intricate dance of betrayal and conflict. Someone knew the chilling satisfaction. Someone who knew the chilling satisfaction of a plan executed with cold precision. I sometimes wondered about Chloe, the barista with the bird tattoo. Had she been caught in the scam's fallout? Was she a victim or a willing accomplice? The thought would flicker, then fade. To that day, she was just another thread in the tapestry, a catalyst for a transformation that had been simmering beneath my surface for years. Oh, the unsent reply. It wasn't just about the divorce or the money or the mistress. It was about the silence I had cultivated, the quiet power I had discovered within myself. It was about the unspoken truth that sometimes the most devastating response is no response at all. Just the meticulous, invisible dismantling of a life, leaving the betrayer to face the wreckage alone. I looked out my new apartment window at the unfamiliar skyline. The city lights twinkled, indifferent to the dramas playing out beneath them. I was a new person in a new place with a new kind of quiet. And in that quiet, I knew, lay a strength I had never imagined. A strength born not of anger or revenge, but of a chilling, precise understanding of human nature. And the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones where the protagonist doesn't scream, but simply calmly walks away, leaving chaos in their wake. The story in Chloe Villan-Haveni, the story of Mark and Chloe was over. My story, however, had just begun, and it was going to be far more interesting than anything they could have ever imagined.